What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video I have a massive special Sioux Falls Regional Airport update for you guys. We have got a loaded special update as we have a total of 7 aircraft diversions to take a look at. 7! The lucky 7, or I guess unlucky 7 in this case for all the passengers that were on board each of these flights. So back on Thursday, May 15th, 2025, the Sioux Falls Regional Airport had what I consider to be a historical day of diversions, with the 7 that we did get, which is the most since I've started tracking aircraft diversions into Sioux Falls around 2018. There's possibly a day well back in the past where there may have been like 8, 9, 10, maybe even more, but I have yet to come across any information that's verifiable, not only, but something that I can actually see, like photographic or video evidence of it. So if anybody knows of that, please leave a comment, because I'd love to dig into that type of stuff. I'm very fascinated by huge waves of diversions and whatnot, and this certainly fulfilled my quota, at least for the year probably, since we've gone quite a few years without having a huge wave of diversions come in all at once. And on Thursday, May 15th, we fulfilled that, much to the inconvenience of hundreds of passengers on all of these flights. But, as an aviation enthusiast, it's definitely surprising to see as many aircraft as we did get on this day. As is the case with these huge waves of diversions that we have gotten over the years, severe weather played a role in it, affecting a lot of flights at the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. On your screen now is a screen recording I took of Flight Radar 24 on Thursday, May 15th, of all of the flights that were coming into Minneapolis that ended up having to divert. So most of the flights are already avoiding storms that were in the area, but then eventually the storms did hit, and there was a tornado warning associated with that first wave of diversions, or at least with the storms that caused that first wave of diversions. There was a tornado warning just north of the airport and right over Minneapolis proper, though I have not looked into whether or not there was a tornado observed in that area. But it was enough to stop flights temporarily, and that sent a few aircraft to Sioux Falls. The storms moved out and eventually everything resumed, but partially because the airport is down to just one runway, the crosswind runway, which is 4/22. That's the runway where, when I went to Minneapolis for the first time, at least during my YouTube days, that's the runway that they were using when I got to plane spot there. So, they're down to that one runway because of the construction, and because of that, and with a huge line of aircraft that were supposed to be coming in, it turned sour rather quickly as all the aircraft ended up having to divert to just a bunch of other airports. So again, as you look at this screen recording from Flight Radar 24, you can see the aircraft, even the ones that were returning from Sioux Falls. It was the Sun Country plane that actually had to go into a hold for a little while to wait out on the storms. And eventually all the other aircraft, they started holding, but there's still a good wave of aircraft coming in. And then eventually things turned sour rather quickly as everybody had to divert, including a wide-body aircraft, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But as you see, all the flights eventually cleared out, and then they were able to get aircraft back into the airport after a quick stoppage. And as night began to fall, operations would resume as intended. So as we begin this update, we'll go ahead and get started at gate number 1. This is the Sun Country flight that I was referring to earlier, the 737-800 with the splits. This arrived in from Los Angeles, California, and this is now the second time this year that we've gotten a Sun Country diversion. On the same day, we actually did get a charter Sun Country aircraft. I saw it earlier that day, so the fact we got 2 Sun Countries in the same day is pretty astonishing, and one of them not even supposed to be on the schedule. But on its way back, this actually did depart right on time at just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But unfortunately, the same cannot be said for this aircraft, this Delta A330 300, if I can get the tripod to center up on there. That's still a little off. That's better, and I guess it's just leave it as is. But this A320 300 diverted from Austin, Texas, arriving in as flight Delta 2887. It was Sun Country 422 on that first aircraft there. And this aircraft was scheduled to return at 7:30 p.m. Thursday evening, But it did not leave until 11:28 a.m. the next morning, so I don't know what caused the significant delay. I just hope that the passengers were all compensated for the significant delay. I think now there is a law in effect where airlines are required to give passengers compensation for long delays like that. I think if it's exceeding, I don't know what the exact number is, probably like 3, 4, 5 hours or something. If a delay exceeds a certain amount of time, then the airlines are required to give passengers compensation. But since this is a diversion and these are very special circumstances, I'm not sure what the regulations are with that. But regardless of that, I hope the passengers still got compensated with a hotel stay overnight at the Aerostay, which is the hotel connected to the airport terminal. But since it only has like 80 rooms, I'm sure that hotel was probably booked up, and there's probably a couple others that reached near capacity on Thursday night. So whatever the case may be, hopefully everybody was able to get a good night's rest. And if they didn't, I hope you do. I hope you did the night after, because it's not something you want to be a part of. Even as fascinating as it is for me, since I've never really been a part of it, I still haven't fully understood the inconvenience behind it. But hopefully it stays that way for me, since I would hate to be a part of a diversion, especially one where it gets delayed to the next day. Then we move on to a regularly scheduled flight just in the mix for the other diversions in this update. This American A319 arrived in from DFW as Flight 2937. This arrived in at 9:16 p.m., had to be scheduled at 9:37 p.m. arrival. So American from DFW, the mainline service is back, returned earlier this month in May, and it will stick with us here through the summer. So good to see the mainline service coming back on the 319, and they have swapped it for the occasional 320. There was even a 321 that they sent in earlier in May. It was supposed to be on a Neo, actually, but then they swapped it to a regular 321. So not sure what's happening there with the Neos coming in, but hopefully they actually send one in at some point, because that'd be cool to see one. And then moving over to Gate 7B, there is a taxiing aircraft, but I'll get to that in just a moment. So at Gate 7B, we also have another regularly scheduled flight, this United CRJ 550. And this came in from Chicago O'Hare as Flight 4173. This is a GoJet-operated flight. This aircraft arrived in at 6:30 p.m., delayed from a 5:59 p.m. scheduled arrival, delayed by 31 minutes. Now, when I went to the airport to spot the second wave of diversions, they actually had two of these coming in at like about 30 minutes apart from each other, because the other one was already delayed by like 3 hours. Obviously, since I don't have a duplicate 550, I can't really do that, and I'm also out of gate space here, so we'll just have to make do with the one for now. And then we'll move on to another diversion. Yes, we had one of these divert, which is obviously not very exciting because we get these on the daily from Denver. But this United Express Ember 175, it came in from San Francisco as Flight 5501, a SkyWest-operated flight. This was one of the early morning-ish diversions, scheduled to depart back to Minneapolis at 10:25 a.m., but it did not depart until 3:26 p.m., which now that I think about it, I don't think that time is right, because they were around early to mid-afternoon, so that departure time is not really accurate. So that's not really a proper representation as to the delay. It was probably close to on time, but that's just what Flight Radar reported, and sometimes the diversions can be a bit wacky since they're obviously not planning for those ahead of time, at least far enough in advance to where they can put them properly on the schedule. So again, that time is way off with the scheduled time, if I remember right, because yeah, all the other ones, they're right around 2, 3 o'clock, about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so you have to disregard that time for now. And then we're back to a regularly scheduled flight, this United 737-700. And I also forgot to mention as well, if you noticed earlier in the video, you saw a scrolling ticker. Those were all of the diversions out of Minneapolis on May 15th. So let me know what you guys think of that graphic, and if there's any other big diversions that happens out of Minneapolis, I'll be sure to continue doing that. So let me know what you think of the graphic, and if there's anything else I should make adjustments to. I'd love the feedback on it, since I like to experiment with graphics and whatnot, try to get creative and take advantage of all the editing experiences that I have had over the years and all the skills I'm learning. The 737-700 arrived in from Chicago O'Hare as Flight 2113 at 10:50 p.m., delayed from a 10:12 p.m. scheduled arrival, delayed by 38 minutes. And this is also in the older Unicon livery as well, so not all the 700s are yet painted in the Evo Blue livery. And then one more aircraft at the terminal here. We have a Delta A320, and this is another one of the diversions. we actually had two A320s come in. This first one from DFW I actually ended up missing out on by a couple minutes because I was on my way to the airport to catch the second wave of diversions, which I'll tell more of the story of when we get to the main star of the show a little later in the video. I was just passing by the terminal when I saw the A320 in the distance landing, so didn't get a clip of it, but it is what it is. It's a 320. I've seen plenty of these, and these have come in FSD pretty often as well, so can't complain at all with that. But this ride in from DFW is Flight 2496, scheduled to depart at 6:55 p.m., but it did not leave until 8:44 p.m., so delay of just under 2 hours there. And then a look at the arriving or taxiing aircraft coming into 5A. It is the American Eagle Ember 170 Retro, so another element of excitement to this update because that's just what happens. And this actually did do a go-around at the airport because we had like very strong winds on that Thursday. When I went up to the airport, I about lost my hat. It, like, the hat, it fell off of my head with the strong winds, and the only thing that prevented it from going into the river was the strap around the back, the Velcro strap around the back of the hat, wrapping around my pinky finger. So, had that not happened, I would have lost that hat. It was my Gemini Jets hat that I brought with. So that would have sucked if I lost that, because that was an awesome gift from Todd at last year's Airliners Convention in Kansas City. So thankfully I didn't lose it. It's still with me, and I'll be sure to try and strap down those hats a little more tight the next time I go out to the airport, especially when it's windy, because it's just super windy at the airport. Every time I go, it's always windy. There's wind just whipping around. It's blowing my hat off. It's about to knock me over into the darn river. It just does everything these days. Mother Nature is sometimes a cruel, unforgiving beast. And that is what we saw here with all these diversions on this Thursday. But this one isn't a diversion, but still affected by the weather because of the go-around, the strong winds, obviously playing a role in that. But this arrived in from Chicago O'Hare as Flight 3662, an Envoy-operated flight. And this arrived in 12 minutes behind schedule because of that go-around. It probably would have only been like 5 minutes, but, you know, only a 7-8-ish minute delay added on top of that. Not a huge deal. The go-arounds happen pretty often, especially when it gets to the point where you have these strong winds and you can't really land the aircraft. Because one of the 550s that I saw landing had a bit of trouble landing. It landed on one of the main gear and then eventually got the other one down, so it was a little bit of an off-kilter landing. But again, pretty common in these strong wind conditions, so nothing to be really worried about, but it is fascinating to watch. These pilots get trained to land aircraft in the toughest of conditions, but you obviously get to a point where, you know, if it was really windy or if there was a severe thunderstorm or a tornado nearby, then you can't really land the aircraft safely. So there's always a line to that. You want to train for extreme conditions, but at the same time know those boundaries as a pilot and know when the time is to divert an aircraft away from your intended destination and head to another place to wait out the storms. So that, my friends, is everything at the terminal, and so far, you know, this has been a pretty loaded update, but we haven't even gotten to the main feature yet, which we'll get to here in a little bit. So now we move to the hard stand where we have two aircraft parked here. Yes, there is the A320 again, I just simply moved it this time. There's no editing magic involved with this, since it's pretty easy to do that. So the second A320 that's on the hard stand, this came in from Kalispell, arriving in as Flight 2863. Now, as I record this update, I'm actually recording this like literally the day after this happened. The A320, it was supposed to depart last night, but I don't even think that one has left yet. Yeah, so it is scheduled to depart at 1 p.m. on Friday, and it is about 12:30 in the afternoon, so the fact that this aircraft hasn't even left yet is quite astonishing, but Delta did have to park a couple of their planes here in the hard stand because obviously the terminal was basically full. The A220 I saw actually parked up here as well, so it would have been likely just right next to the A320 here in this shot, because the 737, this was one of the, from that first wave of diversions, but eventually once the gate opened, they moved it to gate 3, as you saw there. So changes always being made, having to move things around. It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle that the airport operations people have to work with. So huge shout out to them for how they handled everything on Thursday night, because it's not easy handling a big wave of diversions, and I could tell that it's a lot of work to, especially when you get such a like a large aircraft especially, that can also throw a wrench into any plans. So it's not easy handling all those aircraft. So I have to give a huge shout out to them for all the work that they put in so that the airport could still run smoothly, and to make sure that the passengers also had a very somewhat enjoyable, or not really enjoyable, that's not really the right word there, but just an experience to where they at least knew what was going on, and so that they knew if they were going to, or when they were going to get out of Sioux Falls and get to Minneapolis as they were supposed to. But obviously, Mother Nature said no way to that. And then the one on the left, that's the 737-900, and this arrived in from Phoenix Sky Harbor as Flight 1047. This departed 10 minutes early at 3:37 p.m., ahead of a scheduled 3:47 p.m. departure time. So good to at least have that earliness getting out of FSDs. They had the advantage of not really having to worry about more diversions and whatnot, or more weather, but obviously that was not the case. And here is the star of the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Delta Airlines Airbus A330-200 that diverted. And this came in from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, as Flight 165. And this was supposed to depart at about 7:01 p.m., but it did not depart until 9:05, so only behind by a couple hours there. So this aircraft, they parked it on taxiway Mike, which is the east-west taxiway that's just right beneath the intersection of the crossing runway. So you have 1533, and then runway 3 and runway 21 then on the other end. So it parked on that taxiway, since that's really the only space that they could park it at, but they could have parked it on the Air National Guard apron, but they chose to put it on Mike instead, so they just parked it there, and that's where it sat for the entire time that it was on the ground. So yeah, this A330 diversion was certainly something. I was told that we did get a Northwest A330 many years ago from Europe as well, but I will have to do some digging to find out some specifics on where it came from and when it happened, because that would be a very awesome thing to have for retro FSD. So I'll have to hunt down a Northwest A330-200 so that when I do find that information, I'll be able to make an update and put that together, because that's definitely fascinating to know. So it's not the first time we've got an A330 diversion, but I believe this is the first time, at least under the Delta banner, that this has happened, to my recollection. So probably not going to get a diversion like this again, just because we're not equipped to handle wide bodies. So definitely, at least for me, I just want to soak in that experience and just know that I did get to see this, and it was great to spot an A330 here in Sioux Falls, because we've only gotten them at least once before. It was that national example that came in as a military charter, so this is the first time that at least a passenger, like a actual passenger airline one, came in during at least the time that I've been plane spotting here in Sioux Falls. So I don't know if we'll get another one like this again, but I think if we do, it's going to be a very long time until we see another one. So definitely worth the coverage that it has gotten on the channel, and as to why I have been making this update. So there we go. That is the special Sioux Falls Airport update that I have for you guys today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. As always, more fun content is to come throughout the summer, and more plane spotting for sure will be on the way. There's probably going to be another 2 episodes of my series coming out right before the Big Airliners International Convention in Atlanta, which again is going to be another exciting time for the channel, so stay tuned for more details as to what's coming. It'll be released right around the time of the show, a little after probably, so in July you'll know for sure what exactly is coming to the channel from Airliners International and more. With that being said, that is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.